The snow had just started to fall outside the kitchen window when my son-in-law looked me in the eyes across the dining table and said the words I would never forget. "Margaret, I think we both know this family would be better off without you in it." He said it quietly, almost gently, like he was doing me a favor. The candles on the table were still burning. My daughter was upstairs getting ready for bed. My granddaughter was asleep in the guest room down the hall. And Derek sat there in my house, the house I had owned for 31 years, sipping the tea I had made him, and told me I should disappear from their lives. I was 63 years old. I had buried a husband, raised a daughter on my own, built a small business from nothing, and paid off every cent of that mortgage without asking a single person for help. And in that moment, I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I simply set down my mug, looked at him, and said, "Good night, Derek." But inside, something shifted. Something quiet and final, like the sound of a lock turning. I need to tell you how we got there, because none of this happened overnight. My daughter Carolyn was 41 when she married Derek Holt. She had been with him for 3 years before the wedding, and in those 3 years I had watched the light in her slowly change. It was nothing dramatic at first. She stopped calling as often. She started apologizing for things that were not her fault. She laughed differently, shorter, quicker, like she was checking over her shoulder first. But she loved him, and because I loved her, I kept my concerns to myself and I tried. I really did try. Derek was 44, charming in the way that only certain men can be charming, the kind of charm that works in a room full of people and evaporates the moment the door closes. He had an opinion about everything and a reason for every opinion. He told me early on that he believed in strong family boundaries, which I later understood meant that I was supposed to need his permission to be close to my own daughter. My granddaughter Sophie was Carolyn's from her first marriage. She was 9 when Carolyn and Derek got together, 12 when they married. Sophie and I had always been close. I picked her up from school twice a week for years. We baked together, read together, drove out to the lake house in the summers where she caught her first fish off the dock and made me take 17 photographs of it. Those summers were sacred to me. When Carolyn and Derek got engaged, I offered to help pay for the wedding. It was a genuine offer, no strings. Carolyn cried and hugged me and said it meant the world to her. We spent 4 months planning together venues, flowers, caterers, all of it. I was happy. I thought things were going to be fine. Then Derek started making small changes. First, the rehearsal dinner. He decided it should be immediate family only, which somehow excluded me and included his university roommate and 2 cousins I had never met. When I asked Carolyn about it, she said it was just easier this way and changed the subject. I let it go. Then the seating chart. I was placed at the far end of the room, 2 tables away from Carolyn. When I mentioned it, she said the venue had a strange layout. I let that go too. Then, the week before the wedding, Derek asked to speak with me privately. We sat in the living room of my home. He had his hands folded on his knees like he was chairing a board meeting. He told me that he and Carolyn had been talking, and that they felt my involvement in their lives was creating friction. He said I had a tendency to make things about myself. He said Sophie was getting older and needed to form her own identity without me being such a constant presence. He said all of this very calmly, without raising his voice, while a fire burned in my fireplace and his coat hung on my hook by my front door. I asked him if Carolyn had said these things herself. He said, "We're a unit now, Margaret. What I'm saying is what we both feel." I asked if I could speak with Carolyn directly. He said, "I'm handling it." And then he said what he said, that the family would be better off without me in it, that the greatest thing I could do for their marriage for all of them was to step back, permanently. I said goodnight. He left. And I sat alone in my kitchen until 2 in the morning, not crying, just thinking. I had tried to talk to Carolyn twice before that night. The first time, about 6 months earlier, I had told her gently that I felt like I was being pushed out. She had gotten upset, said I was making her feel guilty, said she needed me to trust that she knew what she was doing. The second time I had been more direct, I said I was worried about her, that she seemed different, that I was there for her no matter what. She had cut the conversation short, and Derek had called me 20 minutes later to tell me that I was creating anxiety in his wife. So I understood that going to her again the night before her wedding would only result in another call from Derek. It would only result in Carolyn being put in the middle. And I loved my daughter too much to do that to her on the eve of what she believed was the happiest day of her life. But I had also, by that point, started to understand some things about Derek Holt that Carolyn did not yet know. It had started 3 weeks earlier when I was going through some paperwork in the home office. I had been helping Carolyn with some financial documents. She had asked me to hold on to some of her important papers years ago, just as a precaution, the way families do. I was not snooping, but in organizing those papers, I found something that did not belong there. A letter addressed to Carolyn from a financial institution in Toronto, dated 8 months prior. It had been opened and resealed not well, but enough that you might not notice unless you were looking. The letter referenced a joint investment account. Carolyn's name was on it, so was a name I didn't recognize. Not Derek's name, a woman's name. I did not understand the full picture yet, but I took a photograph of the letter. I put it back exactly as I had found it, and I started paying closer attention. Over the next 3 weeks, I made phone calls. I spoke to a friend who worked in financial services. I contacted, very quietly, a lawyer I had used years ago during my divorce. What I began to piece together was this. Derek had been using Carolyn's financial information, her credit, her good standing, her assets to fund something that she did not know about. There was a second person involved. The investment account was not legitimate, and Carolyn, my careful, trusting daughter, had signed documents she likely did not fully understand. I had the photographs, I had the name, I had a meeting with my lawyer, Helen Brandt, who told me clearly that what I had found was likely the beginning of something bigger, and that if it was what it looked like, Carolyn was in serious legal and financial danger. Helen told me I had 2 options. I could go to Carolyn directly, but if Derek found out before we had enough documentation, he would move quickly, cover his tracks, and Carolyn could end up losing everything. Or I could wait, gather more, and choose the right moment carefully. I did not sleep much in those 3 weeks, and then Derek sat in my living room and told me to disappear from the family. I thought about that all night, about what he had said, about what he thought he knew and what he did not know, about how certain he was that I was simply a difficult old woman who could be managed and dismissed. By morning, I had made my decision. I called Helen at 7 a.m. I told her I was ready to move. She said she needed another 10 days to compile everything cleanly. I said I would give her 2 weeks. I also called my financial advisor and made several decisions about the lake house, that property, the one Sophie and I loved so much, the one Carolyn and I had spent summers at for 15 years. I had always planned to deed it to Carolyn as a wedding gift. That plan changed. I want to be honest with you. Changing that plan was not easy. That lake house was not a weapon to me. It was memory. It was every summer morning with Sophie casting off the dock, every thunderstorm we watched from the screened porch, every birthday Carolyn had celebrated there since she was in her 20s. Deciding not to hand it to Derek along with the rest of my daughter's life, that was not cruelty. That was the hardest act of love I have ever performed. I transferred the property into a trust instead. Sophie was named as a future beneficiary. The terms ensured that the property could not be accessed or claimed by anyone through Carolyn's marital assets. My lawyer handled it properly and in full accordance with the law. It took 4 days and several very focused phone calls, but it was done before the wedding. Then I called my real estate agent, not to sell the lake house, but to update the trust documentation and ensure the property was correctly recorded. I want to be clear about this. I did not sell anything in a day. Anyone who tells you that a property sale happens overnight is not telling you the whole story, and I refuse to tell you anything other than the whole story. The wedding was at a venue outside of Oakville. Carolyn had chosen it herself 2 years ago, a converted farmhouse with a long gravel driveway and maple trees all along the edges of the property. It was beautiful. I wore a navy dress I had bought in September, and I sat at my assigned table at the far end of the room, and I watched my daughter walk down the aisle on the arm of a man who had helped himself to her finances, and I smiled because I was her mother, and this was still her wedding day, and she was still radiant. During the reception dinner, a small sealed envelope was placed at each table setting, tucked beneath the place card. Not at every seat, only one per table, addressed to a specific guest at each table. The guests I had chosen carefully: Carolyn's closest friend, Diane; Carolyn's cousin, Robert, who was a financial consultant in Vancouver; the family lawyer who had helped Carolyn with her first divorce; and two others who I believed would be in a position to respond appropriately and protect Carolyn without creating an immediate scene. The envelopes contained a single sheet of paper each, with a note from me, and a copy of the key document, the letter from the financial institution, along with a brief summary from Helen and a contact number. The note said simply, "This concerns Carolyn's financial well-being. Please call the number on this page before doing anything else. Please do not discuss this tonight." I did not confront Derek. I did not stand up and make a speech. I did not cry in the bathroom or pull Carolyn aside. I sat at my table. I danced once with Sophie, who found me and grabbed my hand and dragged me to the floor during a song she liked, and then I said goodbye quietly to Carolyn, told her I loved her, and I drove home. That night, I sat on my back porch in the cold with a wool blanket and a cup of tea, and I talked to my husband, who has been gone for 11 years. I told him what I had done. I told him I didn't know if it was right. I told him I was scared. Then I went to bed. The calls started 2 days later. Diane called Helen first, that same evening. Robert called the next morning. By the third day, all 5 of the people who received envelopes had made contact. Helen coordinated everything. Within the week, she had connected the right people with a financial crimes investigator she had worked with before. Carolyn's cousin Robert, given his professional background, was able to provide context that accelerated things significantly. I need to tell you what happened with Carolyn, because I know that is what you are thinking about. She called me 11 days after the wedding. She was not at home. I found out later she had gone to Diane's house. Her voice was very quiet, the way it gets when she is trying to hold herself together and not quite managing it. She said, "Mom, I found out." "About all of it," Diane told me. I said, "I know." She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I told her the truth. I told her about the 2 conversations I had tried to have. I told her about Derek calling me after each one. I told her I was afraid that if she knew before I had everything documented, Derek would find out, and she would lose the legal protection she needed. I told her that I chose to protect her even when it meant she might be angry with me. I told her I would make that choice again. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He told me you called him controlling. He said you were trying to destroy our relationship." I said, "I know what he told you." Another silence. Then she said, "The lake house, did you put it in a trust?" I said yes. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. She said, "Sophie's going to be so glad." We talked for 2 hours. We cried. Not because things were resolved, they were very far from resolved. The investigation was in early stages. Carolyn was in the process of getting her own legal representation, and her marriage of 11 days was almost certainly over. None of that was simple or painless. But we talked, the way we used to talk before Derek, and at the end of it she said, "Don't stop calling me, Mum." I said, "I never did." In the months that followed, the picture became clearer. The woman whose name appeared on the account was a former colleague of Derek's. The investment scheme they had been running was not small. Carolyn's assets had been used as collateral without her full informed consent. A formal investigation was opened. There were other people involved, not many, but enough. It took most of the following year to work through the legal process, and I will not pretend it was anything other than exhausting and devastating for Carolyn. But here is what I will tell you. Carolyn is legally protected. The trust over the lake house held. Sophie turned 16 last summer, and we spent 2 weeks there together, just the 2 of us, and she caught a bass off the dock on the second morning and made me take 11 photographs of it. And I took every single one. Carolyn is rebuilding. She has a good lawyer. She has her best friend. She has me. She told me recently that she keeps thinking about the moment at the reception when Diane slipped that envelope into her coat pocket without Carolyn noticing, and how strange it is that the thing that saved her was something she didn't even know was happening. Derek told me I should disappear. He told me the greatest thing I could do was to remove myself from their lives. He sat in my house and said it with perfect confidence because he had decided that I was a nuisance, a complication, an obstacle. He had spent 3 years carefully managing Carolyn's relationship with me because a mother who is present and paying attention is dangerous to someone who is running a con inside a family. He was right that I was paying attention. He was wrong about everything else. I want to say something to anyone watching who is in a position like mine, who has been told they are too much, too present, too involved by someone who has come into their family and decided that the people who loved your child longest are now the enemy. Your presence is not a flaw. Your attention is not a threat unless someone in that family has something to hide. A partner who loves your child well will not need to erase you to feel secure. A healthy relationship does not require the family to shrink. When someone works hard to cut you off from the people you love, that effort tells you something. It tells you more than any explanation they will ever give you. And I want to say something to anyone who is where Carolyn was, who has been told, slowly and carefully, that the person who loves them most is the problem. Who has been handed a version of their own mother, or father, or sibling that was constructed to make them easier to control. If someone in your life requires you to keep your family at a distance in order for them to feel safe, please ask yourself why. Not with anger, not with blame, just with honesty. Because love that is real does not ask you to choose between it and everyone else who has ever cared for you. Silence can be the loudest form of courage. There are moments when the most powerful thing you can do is not react, not argue, not defend, but simply move carefully, document everything, find the right people, and protect what matters most while no one is looking. I am 64 years old now. I have a daughter who calls me every Sunday. I have a granddaughter who texts me photographs of sunsets and asks my opinion on everything from what to read next to whether her new friend seems trustworthy. I have a lake house in a trust, and every summer it still smells like pine and cold water and the particular sweetness of a dock drying out in the afternoon sun. Derek asked me to disappear. I did the opposite. I made sure that when the moment came, everything I had done quietly, in the background, without credit or acknowledgement, would be exactly enough to bring the truth into the light. That is the only revenge worth having, not spectacle, not confrontation, not the last word in a room full of witnesses. Just the truth, arriving at exactly the right time in a small sealed envelope tucked beneath a place card at a wedding table delivered by the woman he had decided did not matter anymore.